everybody. Welcome back to this month's episode of Cronin's Corner. Happy 2022 to everybody. I hope everybody had a great new year with their families and it was relaxing. I'm so happy and excited to be joined today by Cecile Tousignant, who is a resident and local expert and advocate for early childhood education. And I think over the past 2 years, since the onset of COVID, we've really understood for the first time, and there's been some widespread awareness about why early childhood education is so important and how it's critically underfunded right now, and where some opportunities lie to expand services, to help our workforce and get more people, especially women, into the workforce, and also give some key development to our young people that'll put them on good sound footing for the rest of their lives.
Absolutely.
So early childhood education is the topic and subject of our show today. And Cecile, thank you so much for being with me.
Well, thank you for the invitation, Senator.
So can you talk about just how you kind of came into this space and your advocacy now for early childhood education?
So when my children were born, of course my firstborn, I was just fascinated by the development of how children grow. Mm-hmm. And by the time we purchased a space for childcare, we had 3 children outgrowing an apartment, so we bought the Harry Gary Hall and converted it to Busy Bees Preschool Center, which is still operating, and introduced half-day programming and full-day programming with some great families that I'm still in touch with. And so I had my bachelor's degree in economics and sociology, and I ended up getting my master's at Wheelock. And that just learning, of course, is never ending anyway. Right. So I continue, even though I've sold the business in 2006, I'm still an advocate and do consulting, coaching, although at this time, we're kind of barred from going into childcare because of COVID.
Right. And so for everybody just at home who might not be familiar with what early childhood education is, can you explain what does early childhood education mean to you, and how has it developed, that concept and that understanding of early development since you began Busy Bees so many years ago?
So early care and education is now under the governorship of the Department of Early Ed and Care.
Yep.
And we service children ages birth through age 5. Those are the early years where there's immense brain development and critical years for care and education. Believe it or not, you would have to go in. Actually, I think what we'll have to do is invite you to come into a child care center to observe infants and toddlers at play. But there's so much happening that it's absolutely necessary, and this is the foundation to formal academic learning in the public schools. So learning starts actually at birth, probably before birth, and this is what we're trying to support.
Can you talk about just what a head start this programming gives to toddlers and 3- and 4-year-olds that sets them up for success on their first day of school?
Well, I guess most importantly, we address all areas of development: physical, language, cognitive, social, emotional. And with social emotional, it's absolutely necessary now for children to learn how to develop social skills, emotional self-regulation.
Right.
And so early educators are trained to support children in their growth. So, for example, children are trying to share a toy or take turns. The educator will introduce what can you do? How can you solve this problem? And you know what? The children come up with their own answers.
Absolutely.
So,
one of the things that I think we talk about a lot is how one of the worst things that we've dealt with because of COVID is isolation, specifically to seniors. But I've got a lot of friends who have young kids, babies, COVID babies, who have never seen another baby before, and they're 1 year old or 18 months, just because of how scary the virus has been, especially,
Yes.
and mothers don't want to expose their infants to COVID.
Yeah.
How do we overcome that, and why does that make early childhood education so much more important as we recover from COVID?
Well, we can understand the parents' reticence at sending their child into child care, especially infant and toddler. And let me tell you, there is a wait list across the state, probably across the country, for infant and toddler care. Here's an assurance, and that is that families cannot enter the program. Only the child enters the program. They're doing testing prior to entering. The field is regulated, highly regulated in health and safety practices, so there are protocols that child care centers have to follow. And when I say child care centers, I'm also including family child care.
Right.
There's deep cleaning and sanitizing, and that always happened anyway before COVID. So if families are hesitant, they need to be reassured. And when they call for a space, they can ask what the protocols are, and they'll hopefully be reassured to be able to, send their child.
And can you talk about, you said, you mentioned wait lists, but can you talk about how the Department of Early Education and Child Care funds different services across the state right now, and also how that funding is insufficient, and kind of describe the unmet need that still exists?
Well, so the Department of Early Ed and Care is the vehicle for federal funding for Title 20, and that is subsidized child care. So the department has waived parent fees and has still reimbursed child care centers, even though the families were prior to COVID. If a family was absent X number of days or lost their voucher, they would not get funded.
Right.
And that's a big issue for child care, because you can't have funding based on the number of children that attend. And one of the proposals actually in the bill is, it's like riding a bus. I mean, if you've only got one customer getting onto the bus, and you only get paid for that one customer, you couldn't run a bus company.
Right.
So it's the same idea. They also provide grants. There's been the stabilization grant.
Right.
And the PPP, of course, that was not Department of Early Ed, but the stabilization grant, I have directors telling me that there's no way they would have been able to stay open without those
And I know the state over 2021, pushed out approximately $150 million in stabilization grants,
Yes.
and that was life-saving resources.
Doors had to be would have closed. Sadly, a lot of family child care sites have closed. I think 1,200 across the state, and centers have had to close classrooms because they don't get the staff. Staff has stayed home. They've been able to collect unemployment, and of course those boosts in unemployment, some people were making more than they normally get in their weekly pay.
Which ended in September.
Yeah.
And I think when we talk about workforce, I know from kind of my foxhole, every small business owner I talk to, everybody who has a medium-sized business, right up to our the largest employer in the areas, which are AIS with 700 employees. Everybody is hurting to meet their staffing needs, right? And I think when I talk about why early childhood education is such a good investment is because it gets people back into the workforce.
Absolutely.
Can you talk about just how, with that in mind, early childhood education can be an economic driver here in the region?
Well, it's estimated that the country loses $5 billion a year by parents who stay home to take care of the child, losing losing income or contributing to the economy. So, it's absolutely necessary to get women back into the
Right.
workforce, and they're the primary caretaker. And again, women, I'm sure as you know, are still paid less than men
Right.
in their jobs. So,
And I think one of the most alarming statistics that I've seen too is that COVID has impacted society inequitably, right? But no population of people was forced to leave the workforce more than single mothers and single parents, and it's because they don't have childcare options.
right.
Do you have personal examples from the years that you've spent in this space of how you've seen resources change a family's life, a kid's life? I'm sure you've got 100. Do you have a couple that you can share that you think would help people understand?
I do. Okay,
Yeah.
So talking about the Title 20 grants, so I can give you an example of one family who had a little girl, 2 years old. The mother wanted to go back to school, ended up getting her associate's degree, and long story short, she ended up getting her master's degree in nursing. All the while, her child was being cared for a full day. And there's a success story.
Right.
She's pulled herself from poverty, really. Another one is, I don't know if you've heard of the QRIS, but it's a quality rating improvement system that is used by the Department of Ed and Care. And it has tools to measure quality in programs. One of these tools is assessing children and doing screenings. And there's a program called the ASQ, Ages and Stages Questionnaire. With that, administering that in the toddler room, one child was identified as being on the autism spectrum. Mm-hmm. And now, so his needs were addressed early on by involving early intervention.
And caught early on.
And
right?
caught early on.
And diagnosed early on.
I mean, not when he's 4 years old, when he was like 15 months.
Right.
So all those services right up into the public school special education programs, he's pretty much normally developing. I mean, that's quite...
And that absolutely would not have been possible without that early diagnosis and prevention.
No, and
right?
we still have children who cannot attend childcare, who are not identified. And I have another example. This child was having entered a childcare, was there for a couple of weeks. Teachers and the educators are observing the way he sits, the way he walks. It was quite awkward. A little overweight. The director referred this parent to her pediatrician, mm-hmm. then was referred to Children's Hospital. This child had a broken bone in his hip. Now, not to knock pediatricians,
right.
but they spend like 20 minutes with children, whereas we spend a full day,
right.
And we can pick up things. We don't diagnose, but we can share observations with parents, and then so on. So to me, that's so impactful. I mean, that child's going to be taken care of, maybe end up being able to play a sport, whereas if he had carried on into, his body was adjusted to a broken bone, and that just would have ended a lot of physical activity for him.
Absolutely, and affected the rest of his life.
Yep.
So you have been a proponent and advocate for early childhood education since you became a mother. I think this is one of the things that has gotten so much attention during COVID. The need was always there, but we're really feeling it society-wide in terms of parents working remote at home and needing a place for their kids to go, or parents not being able to join the workforce like we talked about. Is there, in your opinion, more awareness about early childhood education and more energy around expanding services than you've seen?
As a result of COVID?
Yes.
You mean?
Or
yes.
right now, right? Do you, in your opinion, are we in a moment where there's more energy and more awareness about why we need to expand services than you've seen before?
There is definitely more energy. I mean, parents are past a stress level right now. It's so challenging to, for example, we've got child cares that, the local boards of health have to close them. You have to do a 3-day deep cleaning. Board of Health has to follow through on contact list. It's so challenging. In the meantime, you've got parents who are at home, need to be at work, have to stay with their child. If they're fortunate enough to have family around, like uncles, aunts, grandparents, they can cover, but it's
That's not a systemic solution, though.
No, it isn't.
Right?
No. Yeah. And so the positive thing is, I think it's highlighting how necessary early care and education is an essential service to society. It really is.
Can you talk about some of the policy solutions that I know you are in constant contact with our office and have helped me learn and become aware about what we need to do going forward and the role that government has to play in this? Can you talk about some of the proposals at the state level and also at the federal level with the Build Back Better Act and how those two vehicles would substantially really transform early childhood education in the country?
Okay. Well, first, I'd like to thank you, Senator Cronin, for being a co-sponsor on the bill S392, which is a way to develop policy and provide child care that will impact families by reducing the financial burden, but also provide bedrock funding for child care, because child care depends on tuition.
Right.
It's not funded otherwise. Yes, we do get grants, but they don't
cover the need, right?
They don't cover the costs. So, for example, the S392 caps, it's a progressive proposal,
and
I
means
hope
tested, right?
Yeah, right. We hope it gets out of committee this before February 2.
Right.
So it doesn't propose how to fund it, but it proposes a timeline to implement the changes that are needed, because we need a whole system.
And what
developed.
I like about the bill the most too is it gives the most resources to the population that needs it the most.
Yes.
You gave the great example and anecdote about the mother who got her associate's degree and then her bachelor's and then her master's in nursing, all because she had the stability and the flexibility because of childcare to go out and get out of poverty and into the middle class and build a career and a life for her family. What I'm proud of supporting the bill because it guarantees that early child education would be free for families earning 50% or less of state median income, and then it scales up based on income level to cap at 7% of total income, and I think that really is going to change the game if we can get this out of committee and passed.
Absolutely. And if Build Back Better passes, Massachusetts will be positioned to receive $1.3 billion over a 3-year period. So as you said, we can scale up, starting with those in greatest need, but capping costs at 7% for all families. Because right now, infant toddler care costs about $20,000 a year.
Right.
Preschool care costs anyway $15,000 a year,
which is absolutely prohibitive to working class families, right? I mean, it's out of reach.
It's a mortgage payment,
right?
It's community college payment. It's not sustainable.
And I think at the end of the day, the toughest discussions we have about the things we need at Beacon Hill, at my level, at the state level, is how are we going to pay for this and how are we going to raise funds for new programs, right? And why I think the Build Back Better plan at the federal level is so important is it's the federal government stepping in and saying, these programs to build our middle class and to support working families are a public good. And they are the best investment we can make in our future workforce, and they're the best investment we can make for the emotional and social development of young people in the next generation.
Absolutely.
And it's paid for, right? We're not taking our credit card out and charging billions of dollars. It's going to be paid for by funds raised by the federal government and the reform of our tax code.
Right, and Massachusetts has to have matching funds too.
Right.
So we have places where we can get that, and public education is already underfunded locally, so we need help at the state level. And I have a few ideas, but that would take that would take a lot of work and time.
But we are, I think, at the precipice of a very exciting moment,
we are.
right? Where
This
we
is-
could see historic investment.
This is why I'm going like this, saying, I hope that
Cecile, what do you want for Christmas?
gets out
right?
of committee. There you go. I've already had my Christmas present, so that would be a topper.
Right.
Yeah.
Can we pivot back? So I think we've talked a little bit about the workforce and the opportunities that are provided for young working class families when they have access to these services. But can we kind of drill down and can you talk about some more examples of how this sets up kids for success when they walk into their first day of kindergarten? And we live in a world of have and have-nots right now, right?
Yep.
If you come from an upper middle class family or a wealthy family, you're gonna, as a toddler or a 3 or 4 year old, have access to these services where, again, the costs are prohibitive for working class families who
Yep.
can't access these programs.
Well, I'd like to mention two things, and one is one of your pet projects is mental health. So the department has also funded mental health through the Together for Kids, for example. That's one agency. And they come into a site and advise when we have children with challenging behaviors, for example. They'll advise the educator what she can change in the classroom to benefit the child. So some children may be overstimulated, so take down some of your postings and so on. But also can provide therapy on site with the child and with the parent. So after the parent comes to pick up the child from work, she can be right there and receive those services.
Right.
Language development. We're getting more and more children with less and less language.
What do you attribute that to?
Well,
Screen time doesn't have nothing to do with it.
oh yeah,
right?
sure.
Yeah.
No.
And I mean, there could be few things more harmful than a kid stuck in front of a screen all day.
Well, conversations.
Right.
Serve and return. Hearing to adults speak. And definitely limiting screen time. I mean, because when a child is here, there's no interaction.
Right?
No,
Yeah.
so you have to have interaction because how are you going to develop language? So that's another benefit of, children attending childcare. And it's a fact that children from wealthier families, like you mentioned, have a vocabulary of about 30 million words by the time they hit public school formal learning.
And I talk about this all the time when I talk to people about why this is so important, but it's not, early childhood education isn't a head start. It is a jump in the race that, the kids who don't get access to that social and emotional growth when they're 3 and 4 year olds, they'll never catch up.
No.
Right? They are always going to be behind, and there's always going to be...
They're behind the starting line.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's like running different races.
Which isn't necessary, We've seen so much growth in children that I've had in the past when I owned Busy Bees. I've had kindergarten teachers tell me I can always tell when they come from Busy Bees, not to sell the business, but because...
You're not an owner anymore, right?
No,
You've got no
that's
fiduciary
right.
interests, right?
That's right, but it's just exposing children to social activities and educational activities and just... it's just so rich. And of course, I feel totally energized when I go into an early childhood classroom. And a lot of people I know say, I don't know how you can stand all that noise. Everybody's moving, and but it's exciting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And can we talk about the other people who are in that field, right? I think when we talk about how we're going to improve our early childhood education system, one of the things that we're not doing an adequate job of right now is paying our early childhood education providers and treating them like professionals with the important work and caseload that they have. In terms of how we need to grow that workforce and how we need to sustain those wages better, can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, let me say that the department is subsidizing pretty much the education for students at the community college and bachelor's degree level to get their degrees because we're a very highly regulated industry.
Right.
So you need certain qualifications to be able to work with children in a program. So at least, you know, we're getting that. That's one side of it. And
that's happened in the past 10 or 15 years,
yes.
right? These pathways have been created. I know
Yep.
Monty Tech also has a pathway for early childhood
That's
educators.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
They offer the CDA, which is a big step because the CDA is nationally recognized.
Right.
But the compensation issue is, you know, $14 is the average of 2019 numbers. $14 an hour is the average that an early educator gets paid.
And in this job market, that's not competitive.
It isn't competitive, and you know, a good number of child care workers are receiving public benefits like mass health and food stamps, and
right.
you know, they're better off if they go to work at McDonald's. They don't have to worry about planning, assessment. You know,
it's probably a less stressful work environment,
no
right?
Stress.
To be in charge of.
Yeah, no stress. So we definitely have to raise that more. I know everybody's looking for employees.
Yeah.
But in this field, we definitely need to. We've got to increase those wages. I mean, it's unavoidable.
And I think, like, as we come to this agreement, really, as a society, that, you know, pre-K and early child care is a public good, I think what we need to do is, you know, pay these people like teachers, and, you know,
yes.
pay them in line with the responsibility that they really have to, you know, develop our young people.
Well, this is the thing, and we're looking at equity. Mm-hmm. We're hoping that, and we do have people in the early education and care field that have bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, and they're not getting paid on a par with the public school teachers in their local districts.
Right.
And it makes no sense because those are such important years. And you know, you have to support these. They need to make a living and support a family in some cases. So it just has to happen. That's why I'm hoping. I so appreciate the fact that you co-sponsored that bill.
But I believe we are at a historic moment, and we are staged for historic investment in this space. But as you look towards the future, final question, what do you hope the future of early childhood education looks like here in North Central Massachusetts 5 years from now?
Oh boy, I hope that we can accommodate and have enough space for all the children who could use early care and education, and that we also are paying early educators what they're worth.
And, you know, how is that going to change the region in terms of...
Okay, you asked a very, very key question, because we will reduce the number of children who are being serviced in special education. Mm-hmm. We will not have, I believe it will impact all of these issues that are coming forward, violence in the schools. Because when we learn how to negotiate at an early,
when you're creating 2 or 3, right?
Yeah, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know, we're creating. That's their neighborhood, and we're learning how to get along with people, and that carries forward. And my philosophy is that we should be teaching from the bottom up. Early education area could be teaching public school policy rather than top down, and it just doesn't work for young children.
Well, Cecile, I'm so thankful for you coming on the show today. I truly appreciate your time and your advocacy. And I know as a legislator, you holding my feet to the fire and making sure that I knew what that bill S-362 does and is. And I look forward to continuing to work with you to provide these essential services here in North Central. So thanks for all you do. And
thank you for co-sponsoring that bill and for all that you do. I've noticed other bills that you're co-sponsoring, so thank you for your service too.
Thank you so much. All right, everybody, that's our show for the month. Happy New Year, happy 2022, and we'll see you in February. Thank you.